Just go.
All natural.
All right, I'm just a little nervous about this shaky chair and my bulkitude. Okay, greetings. It's Elston Solberg here. I'm a long-term agronomist. I've been working with crop intelligence for the last several years, pretty much right from its infancy. Make sure it's there.
Yep. That's
Okay.
perfect.
So question number one. How do I know if frost has affected my crop? If you've got some frost damage in your crop, you're going to, in parts of the field where there's straw and stuff, is be the first place to look, and you're going to see damaged leaves. You're going to see damaged tissue. The combination of knowing which part of the field will be cooler than the other parts would be the first thing I'd look for. I just did another presentation on copper deficiency, and one of the first keys that there is copper deficient in the field is with a bit misdiagnosis of frost injury. The gnarled up, burnt looking leaves and stuff look very similar, and just about universally people misdiagnose copper deficiency as frost injury. Keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking.
In the free world. How do I find the problem areas in my field? There are two patterns. One is a man-made pattern, so those are straight lines. And the other is Mother Nature. That's wonky. And the best learning opportunity for a young agronomist, or anyone for that matter, is where the man-made patterns intersect with the Mother Nature-made patterns. You can put shadows on crops that are tied to technology, all kinds of technology, satellite imagery, drone imagery, yield maps, you name it. There's all kinds of shadows that you can cast in your crop that amplify your ability to identify situations and opportunities.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, question number 4. How deep does rain actually soak into the soil? Depends on the rain, depends on the soil. But over time, we're reading moisture down 1 meter plus. Through the magic of electronic moisture probes, exactly. You can follow after a rain event, you can follow the sensors as we go down the profile. And that tells you very quickly, how much rain you got, how much it got in the soil and everything else. And while we're on the topic, the mobility of water and soil is one thing, but when soil water moves from a rain event, there are other nutrients that can be taken with it. And I'm always surprised at the lack of understanding about this, but there's key nutrients like nitrogen, like sulfur, like chloride, like boron, like molybdenum, and like water. And so when water is moving down the profile, it's moving down those other nutrients with it, and all of those nutrients are anions. In the anion form, they move freely in the soil. Question number 5. What wind speed is too high for spraying herbicide? Oh, did I skip one? But within crop intelligence, we've got moisture probes measuring soil water. We've got met stations measuring a whole bunch of other stuff, and there's some really cool tools in there that can help us with spraying decisions. Obviously, wind speed, direction, and all that kind of jazz, but also delta T, which is very, very powerful. And it always blows my mind how few farmers and agronomists actually embrace the concept of delta T. And it's basically a combination of relative humidity and temperature, and it's been used around the world for decades now. I think the Aussies were some of the first. Doesn't really matter, but it's a extremely usable tool. Next question.
Woo!
We're just chunking through these. I love it. So, what conditions do I need to spray my crops? Well, number 1 is delta T. If you're in the good zone, I think it's 2 to 8. You might stretch it to a 10. Delta T is a no-brainer. Everyone in the industry needs to understand how to use it, and not like yesterday or tomorrow, but right now. Delta T. Okay. can heat during flower hurt my yield? Duh, your crop is most sensitive. When it's flowering and really beginning the whole reproduction process, that's when it's most sensitive. And so every crop that we grow has a different heat sensitivity. Canola typically is considered to be 28. Peas, most pulses would be lower. Peas in particular will be about a 25. Cereals, corn, with the exception of barley, would tend to be more in that 30, 31 range, something like that, to assist with our resistance to heat stress during pollination or flowering. Make sure your plant's full of boron. With most crops, it'll add 2 to 3 degrees Celsius protection. And there's plenty of data, especially in the corn world and more recently in other crops as well, is that you jack up boron, you also jack up calcium, and those two play a very incredible role in the pollination process of virtually all crops. Question number 2 on this storyboard. What is the most overlooked nutrient in today's cropping system? As a soil scientist, I could have a lot of fun with this, but I won't. The nutrient that shows up overwhelmingly being deficient is phosphorus. We need to do a much better job of understanding phosphorus. We need to start thinking about applying removal rates, blah, blah, blah. All right, question number 3 on this board. Why do you think people do believe in foliars? That's a backwards, upside down question, because most people don't. We're just running through these now. I'm a zoomer. Okay. How to set yield goals for crops. This is what I've done for my career since 1992. If you know how much water's in the soil, how much crop available water's in the soil, and you know on average what falls from the sky during an annually or during the growing season, you have the fundamental information that you need to help set yield goals. Oh boy, Houston, we have a problem. Okay, so with my able assistance, we were able to view the next question. And that question is, how do I know when disease risk is building? Nothing but easy questions here. So disease is a function of climate, disease organisms, and the right growing conditions, growth stages of the crop. But because there's weather stations and stuff involved with various sensors, leaf wetness sensor, anytime you're over 5,000 units, whatever that is, on that leaf wetness sensor for 18 hours, that's when you're getting a signal. Cross my fingers in my eyes. When is it too late to adjust my yield expectations? When is it too late to adjust my yield expectations? So I'm going to rephrase that a little bit. When is it too late to grab more yield if the water-driven yield potential is higher than your yield goal? At the end of the day, when it comes to crop intelligence, there's really only 3 decisions that you need to make. If your water-driven yield potential is at your yield goal, then she's steady as she goes. Keep with the plan, keep doing what you're planning on doing, you're good. If the water-driven yield potential is less than your yield goal, then you can start cutting stuff out. Maybe you don't need that second application of herbicide or fungicide or whatever it might be. Okay, so those are 2. The other one is your water-driven yield potential is higher than your yield goal. Obviously, the sooner you can react to that signal, the greater the opportunity of achieving the full potential of that water-driven yield potential. But here's a fun fact that I learned a few years ago with a study that Myers, Nurse, and Penny did. And what they found in this huge study was that 4 additional bushels of yield equals 80% more profit. Okay, another interesting question. How much soil moisture should the soil have before planting? So for here, it's kind of a situation where you've got the crop intelligence moisture probe. Can you hand me the moisture probe? So obviously this is a pygmy moisture probe, and we've only got 2 sensors, but the critical part of this profile is the top 4 inches. You want that to be moist, right? And or some reliability, thank you, on understanding that you have some rain coming in the forecast. And that's another component of crop intelligence, is that there's also a very robust weather model within it. So, again, if we're thinking like a plant in 4 dimensions, and in this case, we're just getting it seeded, and we can see that there's some moisture in the profile, maybe not as much as we think we would like in the top, but we also know that there's a high probability of rain in the forecast. Then it's like give or snooze. The flip side of it is that if your profile is completely saturated, there's certain crops that suffer from saturation. I'll use just canola as an example. If you've got a young canola seed in saturated soil for 3 to 4 days, you take 20% of the yield potential of that crop away, and it's never coming back. Never coming back. If that same seed is in a saturated soil for 10 days, you're taking away over 40% of the full water-driven yield potential. You're taking it away, and it is never coming back. So there's different sensitivities amongst crops in terms of the dryness of soil and the saturation of soil. So you got to factor that in as well. They didn't have an instruction manual come with this to tell me how to do this. How to estimate crop yield early in the season. Well, we're kind of going over a little bit of the same territory. The one thing that I do know is that when I travel around the planet, especially in dryland agriculture, I've been asking the same question of people for 14 or 15 years now, thousands of people, and nobody knows how much water it takes to grow anything. Literally, nobody knows. It's getting better in Western Canada because some of us have been banging the drum for quite a few years now, but most people don't know how much water it takes to grow anything. You'd be surprised how many farmers don't know what their average growing season precipitation is. All you need to know is some simple stuff. Plus, with the advantage of crop intelligence moisture probes, you also know what's in the soil. At the end of the day, the brilliance within crop intelligence and the app that's on your phone, your laptop, your iPad, your desktop computer does all that work for you. In fact, one of the best parts of crop intelligence in the first few years of development was a calculator that measured, at the end of the season, measured how much water is in the soil, and then using probabilities of over winter recharge and over growing season total rainfalls to give you exactly the ranges. So if you're a pessimist, you pick a low winter over recharge, you pick a lower number of in-season rainfall. If you're a pessimist, you got a number. If you're sort of a normal kind of grower saying, yeah, I think it's going to be kind of normal, then you pick different numbers. But we want to make it complicated for some reason. How does rainfall affect crop yield? Well, it's the same thing, only a little bit more complicated, I guess, because if you want to get down in the weeds and stuff, the crop doesn't care where the water comes from, if it comes from the soil or comes from the rain, hopefully both. Yeah, it takes a little bit more energy to pull water from the depths of soil, that's true. The plant doesn't want to burn up a whole bunch of energy doing that if it doesn't have to. But any kind of rain is a welcome rain, with the exception. Sandy soils will take in water rapidly. Clay soils won't. So which soils are going to allow a heavy rainfall to come in relatively rapidly, and which ones are not going to allow that to happen? So you have to factor those things in. Soil texture, soil organic matter. 1% increase in soil organic matter allows the soil to hold 167,000 pounds more water. So if you've got grandma's field that's 3% organic matter and grandpa's field is 6% organic matter, which one's going to hold more water and have more water-driven yield potential? Grandpa, right? So, I mean, while a lot of this stuff can get complicated all to heck, some of it is so straightforward it's not even funny. And rainfall during the growing season, if the intensity is really high, then we have to discount it. If the rain comes way too late in the growing season, then obviously it's not going to have as big a positive effect. But that's the kind of stuff that we're building into crop intelligence as we improve the algorithm and everything else that we're trying to incrementally improve so that we get you out of the section, into the row, and into the seat at some point in time. Okay, that's board number 2. This is tile number 3. How good can we be?
Pretty good.
Let's... Gracias. What is your number 1 tip to increase water use efficiency in cereal and oilseed crops? Well, my number 1 tip, which will have various number 1 subsets, is to understand how important water is, how much water it takes to grow anything, is to understand water, trust the data, probes don't lie, the weather stations don't lie, the algorithms are getting better and better and better. But for me, and I'm incredibly biased because I am theoretically a soil scientist, is that optimizing production is always about balancing the nutrient availability to the crop. And so of the 17, 18, 19 essential nutrients, we need to do everything in our power to balance the crop's requirements of those nutrients in a timely fashion during growing seasons. Now, having said all of that, we also have to do a good job of rotation, of tillage, of insect control, of weed control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Soil moisture before seeding, why it matters. Well, soil moisture before seeding matters because you need that top couple inches where you're placing all the fertilizer and seed into to have enough water to allow the crop to imbibe the water and get the whole germination process started. 2 more to go. I'm just starting to have fun. Did my soil have enough moisture going into the season? Well, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that in the fall, when the moisture probe is removed, we have a measurement of not only how much water's in the soil profile, we also have a measure of where the water is in the profile. And that's really important. If everything's dry in the top and maybe wetter down below, that's one thing, but if it's kind of evenly distributed, that's another thing. Okay, last question for this session of this insanity. What should growers do differently to manage canola in a high rainfall year versus a low rainfall wheat year? Well, I can grossly oversimplify that whole question by saying, if you're looking at the next year yield predictor, and so you know how much water's in the soil at probe removal, you know how much overwinter recharge there is, plus or minus a hand grenade. You know how much you can expect during the growing season, and you also have control on the scenario. So you're basically, what we've done with crop intelligence is you've turned it into a yield game. We've gamified it. And some people get excited about gamification. And so you can create all the scenarios known to humanity with those parameters. Is it going to be a big recharge year? Is it going to be a in-between rainfall year? And all the variations and combinations. And you can basically come up with what your water-driven yield potential. And as once you decide which scenario you're most comfortable with, now you can make all of the decisions that are necessary for seeding rates, for fertilizer rates, for what fungicides I need in the shop, what herbicides I might need in the shop. Is there some issues around bugs, this, that, and the next thing? You've laid out the game plan by gamifying it, whether you know it or not. If you've got 20% more water-driven yield potential with the scenario that you're most comfortable with, then you got to plan on 20% more fertility management or fertility decisions. And this leads me to another thing that it's probably the hardest coaching thing and the hardest conversation that I've had recently with growers, and that is most growers in the advanced agronomy group are way too aggressive with their nitrogen. And so when you sit down a grower that's in that group, some of the very best farmers in all of Western Canada, and you say, listen, your phosphorus management kind of sucks, but you are knocking it out of the park with the nitrogen. Has it ever occurred that we should maybe cut back on our nitrogen and switch some of those dollars maybe to phosphorus or to boron or zinc? And that's a really hard conversation. One of the simplest things that I've been talking about recently has been the possibility of using a biological to enhance the availability of phosphorus. The ROIs on the biologicals is somewhere between 4 and 5 to 1. So in other words, if you replace a little bit of the phosphorus with some biologicals, in the short term, that's a good financial decision. The ROIs are high. There's very low agronomic risk as long as you get enough phosphorus in the system as a starter, blah, blah, blah. And then the second part of the scenario is you don't have to do it on every field, none of this on every field. Try some fields, learn some stuff, incrementally improve. But the other piece is on a few fields where your soil test is really high in nitrogen and you're still planning on putting on 100 pounds of nitrogen, maybe consider cutting even 20% out of the applied nitrogen. That's about $20 an acre. So if you save $15 in the phos and you save $20 in the nitrogen, and then, crazy idea, your canola, try some strips across a bunch of fields or have the audacity to try seeding entire fields with 2 pounds less canola. That's another 30 some bucks. So right there, we found 20 plus 15 times 30 plus 30. What's that? That's a lot of money. That's what that is. And it's nothing overly over the top. These are all standard agronomic, low risk suggestions that can turn a lose money, break even money year into a money making year. This has been fun. My heart stopped palpitating just a few minutes ago, so I hope this is useful.